Welcome, guys, to another episode. Today, I'm excited because we've got Stephen, the dental hygienist, with us today, and he's going to be really telling us what life in his shoes is like, what he's getting up to, and what it's just like working as a hygienist in practice. I want to also get into all that he's doing on Instagram, brand deals that he's doing as well. Just different things he's getting involved in. That's exciting. So no, thank you, Stephen, for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me on my first podcast. So it's exciting.
Yes. So actually, for those that don't know, just let us know whereabouts are you based, and how's your day been going today?
Yeah. So I'm based in Brighton. So I work between two practices in Brighton as a hygienist, and had a good day today. Very busy. Couple of challenging patients, but otherwise it was all good. All good. Had a few patients running late today as well. So that always adds a little bit of stress to the day, but otherwise it was good.
So, it must be quite relaxing being close to the beach. How is it working and living in Brighton?
Yeah, it's good. It is nice. So one of the practices is literally 5-minute walk from the beach. So that's quite often how we get FTAs, is because when it's a sunny day, patients would rather be at the beach than coming to see me. So, I mean, I can't blame them, but so it's nice. It's good in Brighton. It's nice. Some days I cycle into work now, which is nice. I cycle along the seafront and up. So, yeah.
Have you always lived in Brighton, or did work take you to Brighton?
Yeah, no. So I grew up in Brighton, and then I was a dental nurse in Brighton. And then I went off traveling for 1.5 years. So I lived abroad. So I lived in Australia and then traveled Asia. Wow. Then I came back and started my hygiene, which was in Essex. So then I lived in Essex for 2 years and then came back to Brighton. So pretty much always been Brighton, apart from sort of traveling and then uni and stuff. So
How did you end up in dentistry? So you said that you were nursing at first. How did that transition to I'm going to be in dentistry work out for you?
Yeah, so my stepmom's a hygienist, so that's how I kind of fell into it. So when we were sort of kids growing up, my dad's a builder, and it was either you can go to work with dad on the building site, or you can go to work with Emma. And I was like, I'll come to work with Emma in the summer holidays, get some pocket money, and then that was it. So I kind of just really enjoyed it. And then when I was at school, when I was 16, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I knew I liked cars. So I applied for a mechanics course. They're kind of pushing you to get onto a college course. And then my stepmom said, we need a dental nurse at one of our practices. Why don't you apply and give it a go? Because you've got nothing to lose. So that was that. So I started dental nursing straight out of school, 16. Had a week off school and went straight into it. So.
And how long was it before starting dental nursing and having this year away in Australia?
So I was a dental nurse for 8 years. So then I got my entry levels ready for uni, and then I went off traveling for 1.5 years. So I kind of always knew I wanted to do hygiene. So I love nursing, but I kind of knew the ultimate goal was to do hygiene. So that was kind of why I wanted to make sure I got all the entry levels there. So then I could essentially, go to university when I got back. So
Do you think that there was an advantage there? Do you think there was an advantage of you starting out in nursing and then transitioning to hygiene?
Yeah, definitely. I think so, because Essex's course, they had, I think it was about 33 people on our course. Majority were dental nurses. They did have people on there that weren't dental nurses as well. So, but then they had to do sort of 6 weeks of dental nursing before they could even start clinics themselves, to kind of get them up to scratch. But I think definitely, just understanding things like root canals. I mean, obviously you don't do these as a hygienist, but you still have to learn about them, root canals, crowns and fillings, and just being able to identify that in the mouth just from nursing just made it a hell of a lot less overwhelming for me when I started in clinics. So, because it was placement based at Essex. So we did 2 days a week in clinics and then 2 days a week in uni. So it was like in a regular practice. So we started off like nursing for a second year student. And then as we kind of got progressed, like we could do stuff, we did like oral health screenings, first oral cancer checks, then we did like BPEs, and we just kind of built it up gradually. And then you kind of chop and change between the second year. So it definitely helps. And I think also having that interaction with patients made it
Yeah.
less overwhelming, because you could kind of, you know what it's like in dentistry, kind of filling in the gaps and small talk a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
Would you say that the course was quite intense from year one to the end, or were there certain parts that got intense?
All of it. Yeah, it was hard work. So I'm better sort of like, I'm more practical when I do
Yeah.
stuff. So I'm not massively academic. But my stepmom, so when I started dental nursing, my stepmom was very strict with me. And her colleagues were like, you know, cut him some slack. He's just started. But she said she wanted me to be a good dental nurse.
Yeah.
And she said to me before I got into hygiene, she said, be prepared. She said, you're going to find it really difficult. You're going to struggle. You're going to get through it, but you're going to struggle with it. You'll probably find the practical better. So I kind of had that in my head, knowing it was going to be difficult.
Yes.
So I think I was kind of prepared for it to be a challenge. And it was, you know, I enjoyed it. But yeah, you know, it is hard work. It is hard work. And there was quite a lot of, I guess we're going to come back to this when we talk about Instagram stuff, but there was quite a lot of people talking about like their journeys as, you know, as student hygienists. And a lot of them weren't telling everybody the real side of it, of how hard it was. It was all the sort of, all the, you know, the fancy stuff, and it's really nice, which it is, it's great, but not the hours and hours and hours of living in the library revising kind of thing. So yeah. So I would just say to people, like, if you want to become a hygienist, like nurses now that are thinking of progressing into hygiene, I always just say it's something you've got to do if you really want to do it. You know, it's something you've got to be passionate about, because it's hard work, but it's rewarding. It's worth it. It's definitely worth it. So
just give us a little practical advice in terms of, you're a nurse, you want to get into hygiene, how to best prepare to apply to the course. What advice would you give?
Yeah, sure. So it depends on look at the different criteria for the universities. So like I was saying, I wasn't the most academic. You know, I was always sort of like C grades in my, you know, GCSEs and stuff like that. So I was just like an average student, I would say. So for me, it was just, I knew I was going to have to work a bit harder. So I looked at the different entry levels, and a lot of the universities wanted A levels as well as sort of dental nursing, or instead of dental nursing, essentially they wanted A levels and then other qualifications. Some universities wanted ideally A level in biology, but if you had dental nursing, then 2 other courses within dentistry. So I did radiography, had my dental nursing, did radiography, I did fluoride application and oral health education, which I think is a really good course if you're a dental nurse. Oral health education was really good. So then I applied to a few universities, and Essex actually look at you as a person, not just as your grades. So they like having dental nurses there. They don't obviously, you know, prioritize dental nurses, but they quite like that you've got that experience with dealing with patients. You know, like they say, they can teach people like me, you know, the book stuff, but you can't teach someone the bedside manner, essentially, of how to talk with patients, which is what the job is, really. You know, you've got to know the technical side of it, but as you know, it's not what you're using day to day. So I would just say, like, look at the different criterias, and don't be too overwhelmed if you're looking and you're a bit like me and you're not the most academic, but you know, you're really good with people and you think you'll be good at the actual job. Then look at other ways of you know, if you haven't got the A levels, look at other ways of getting in, and just, you know, just be persistent and experience as well, essentially.
And is this done through UCAS applications in terms of the different?
All done through UCAS, which again is a bit of a minefield. It's quite confusing. It's all sort of points and stuff like that. But yeah, you just kind of, I think you can do like 5 applications. So I would say, like, pick your top 5 universities where you really want to go, or would like to go, and then put those obviously in order, and then see if you get offered. But I applied for 5, and I only heard back from Essex, and I was actually traveling at the time, and I was due back in the July, and I got offered an interview in the March. And obviously I know how competitive it is to get in. They have like 500 applicants for like 15 places or something ridiculous. Wow. And they said, your interview's in March. And I said, well, I'm back in July. So this was to start in the September. I said, I'm back in July. Can I have my interview then? And they were like, nope. You've got to come in. You can't do Skype interviews. I think it's changed a little bit since COVID, but it was like, we can't do Skype interviews. It's like group activities, one-to-one. So they said, take it or leave it, basically. And I thought, well, I don't want to miss this opportunity. So I flew back from Australia for 4 days for my interview. and it works, luckily. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, one of the questions was, because Essex has lots of placements that are quite spaced around Essex. They said, "How are you with traveling?" I
Yeah.
said, "Well, I've flown across the world for this, so yeah." I'm not saying that's what you've got to do, but you know, if you really want it, don't give up,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. And what would you say was like a highlight for you when you were doing the course?
When I was at university, so
Yeah.
when I was doing hygiene, so I like the patient interaction. So
Mm.
we would give patients feedback forms. So it was really nice getting some positive feedback
Yeah.
from the patients already. It was nice as it kind of went on, because you go in and, you know, obviously I've been dental nursing for a long time, so I was used to being in with patients. As soon as I first sat in that chair, I was like, this is not easy. I'm looking in the mirror and I'm like, I can't see anything. This
Yeah.
is, how do people do it? You know, just trying to do like a BPE, which now we don't
Yeah.
even think twice about. But so yeah, that was a highlight, was getting good feedback. And then the
Yeah.
placements, having the lecturers there essentially, you know, kind of
Yeah.
guiding you through and checking on patients. And it was nice as I was getting really good feedback. Oh no, you know, you haven't missed any calculus, or you haven't, you know, it was good. It was nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely probably a highs. And then the people you meet, like the
Yes.
people you meet, you're friends for life, like friends for life. So yeah,
I'd say when I first started treating patients, that's when
yeah,
it clicked that, yes, this is actually a career that I want to do.
yeah,
When did it
yeah,
click for you that, okay, I thought I wanted to do this, but now I
yeah,
know that I want to do this? When would you
yeah.
say that happened for you?
So I think, I don't know the exact point when it was, but probably when I started. I think when I treated my whole patient, like my first whole patient from start to finish.
Yeah.
So at placements, like I was saying, as you get signed off as you go through, you're doing like BPEs, and then you're doing, you know, and then the second year does the Supra, and then you get passed off to do Supra and then sub. So I think once I'd had my first, you know, full patient that I'd done. And then when I got into second year, I then had a first year that I was mentoring. And that's
Yeah.
when it was as well, it was kind of like, oh, okay. Because you just, you know, you doubt yourself. A lot of people, you know, the
Mm.
same. I think a lot of people in dentistry, we're perfectionists, but we just want to do the best. We're dealing in healthcare, we're dealing with patients. We want to give them the best treatment we can. And I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as well. So
Yeah.
I think it was nice to go, okay, I do know what I'm doing. I keep doubting myself, but actually,
Yeah.
I'm doing all right.
And then, okay, you started working,
Yeah,
you graduated.
yeah,
What would you say the reality of working as a hygienist was when you first started working, as opposed to when you used to see your stepmom doing it?
yeah,
Was there much of a difference when now you stepped into it,
yeah,
or was it what you had thought it would be or expected?
yeah. It definitely was different. I mean, I could tell that from as soon as, like I said, when I started looking in patients' mouths when I first got to uni, I was like, okay, she makes this look a lot easier than it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the good thing I found though with Essex, because it was placements. So like in regular practices, and like I said, you start off nursing for a second year and then doing, you know, parts of the appointment. I was kind of got used to working in real practice, and they pick your placements based on what experience you need. So my last practice I had wasn't the best practice, but it was great experience. So there was, you know, there was things that you just couldn't do, you know, which does happen day to day. You can't do things textbook. So it was a great learning curve. So I think I was very grateful that I had that last practice. And it was a lot of perio patients that had been undiagnosed or untreated. And we just couldn't get them back in, and they couldn't afford to come back in. You know, it's good they could see the students for free, but traveling and stuff like that. So you kind of had to improvise a little bit and just kind of
Mm.
do what you could do. So yeah, I came out feeling confident, but definitely not confident at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I wasn't
Yeah.
like overconfident. It was still a shock when I first started. Um, but I think the best thing that happened was my boss, who I've known for a very long time. I used to nurse for her as well, and her son was on my nursing course as well, Christina. She let me have longer appointments to start with for the first couple of weeks. So
Yeah.
then I just eased myself into it, and it was just a nice way, instead of going in, you know, half an hour back to back, the first couple of weeks to just kind of find my feet really helped.
So are you applying for jobs directly once you graduate, or is there like a transition period? So for me, I had a foundation year where I had a supervisor. How is that transition from you? Is it a hard one, or do you get a soft transition into working life?
For me, it was quite lucky, and a lot of the people on the course found the same from dental nursing. So you'll know what dentistry is like; it's a small world. So it's lots of knowing lots of people. So I was nursing on my days off. I would still come back to Brighton, so I'd stay in Essex in the week, and I'd come back to Brighton, and I was nursing at Dental Health Spa, one of the main practices I work at now. And then Christina said, "We're going to need a hygienist. So when you qualify, there's a job here." So I was really lucky that I was offered that job. Another practice I used to work at Fridays, which I dropped, I used to nurse as well. And they were like, "We're going to need someone on a Friday. So when you're free." So I was quite lucky that most of my days were filled from practices that I'd already worked at that needed a hygienist. And I think in Brighton, there's not a huge pool of hygienists because the nearest dental schools are London, Portsmouth, Essex, Bristol. So whereas some of the girls on my course that are from Essex, they have quite like a high graduation of people from Essex, essentially. So there's quite a lot of work, thankfully, in Brighton. So a few others, it was kind of a lot of it's through word of mouth, really. There's, I think, a few jobs I'd seen, but most of it was from, a nurse that I'd worked with or a friend that said, "Oh, someone so's looking." So, yeah, I was quite lucky in that sense that, yeah, I had work lined up, a lot of jobs lined up. So I'd say if you're a non-nurse, or maybe you haven't been nursing very long, or you're moving to a different area, start applying for jobs in your final year. So when I did hygiene, it was 2 years. It was still like 3 years compressed into 2. So we finished a bit later in the year. Some of 3 years. So when you're in your final year, halfway through is when you want to start looking for jobs, I would say, probably. And just telling them, rough start date, September sort of time or whenever it is.
What are the things to look out for when you're looking at different practices? What should you stay away from, and what's good to spot within a practice?
So for me, I personally won't work without a nurse, and that just comes from, like, a lot of it is advice from my stepmom. She did years without a nurse, and she was like, "It's so much easier with a nurse," but also because I'm male as well, so I just feel more comfortable having a chaperone in the room, essentially. And they had kind of said that at university. They didn't say you have to, but they say it's better to have a chaperone because you just don't know.
Tell us a little bit about the background behind that, working with a nurse, without a nurse, how that's always happened, and what's advised now. Just give us a little background for those that aren't aware.
Yeah. So I think really, so dentists, it's compulsory for you to work with a nurse. Whereas hygienist, it isn't. So you can work without a nurse, but it is advised to have a nurse. Some hygienists prefer working on their own. They prefer, I think a lot of hygienists have got used to it. So, or haven't been as fortunate as myself to have a nurse. It's not always possible. But I think the reason why it's not compulsory is because there isn't enough dental nurses. There's not enough dental nurses to correlate with hygienists, therapists, dentists. So that's why they can't make it compulsory at this stage. So you don't have to work with a nurse. It is personal choice. I've got friends that prefer working on their own. But for me, I just like to focus on the treatment and focus on my notes. And it's also nice to have someone there to kind of, for like reassurance as well, if you get a difficult case. And dental nurses are very experienced. They know what they know a lot of the stuff that we know as clinicians. They're the ones that a lot of the time running the surgery. So it's nice to get, do you know what I mean? It's nice to get that support. So yeah. And I would say in terms of sort of looking for jobs, be confident in, if you want to work with a nurse and they don't have a nurse. I've been offered a job and they said, "We don't have nursing support." And I said, "Well, it's a deal breaker for me. I wouldn't work without." And they would accommodate. You can accommodate, fee structure essentially around that to accommodate you having a nurse. And yeah, most of the time, if you ask, a lot of people are afraid to ask, which I was when I qualified. But some practices say, "Yeah, that's fine. We can try and work things out and see if we can make it work." It's not always possible, but yeah. So another thing,
to have that confidence to ask for a nurse.
Yeah. And that comes with experience as well, because when I first qualified, I was like, I can't ask this. If I don't have nurses, I can't ask this. But I think I was lucky because I had the reassurance of my stepmom, who's been in it a long time, and she's like, "No, because it's going to make your working day better. And for me personally, I feel my quality of work is going to be better." So for me, that's why it's a deal breaker. Another thing as well is looking at what dental equipment they've got. So, if there's any particular scalers that you prefer, make sure they've got one of those. So for me, I personally prefer EMS. A second to that would be a Cavitron if they haven't got it. If they haven't got that, then I don't know.
So for those that don't know, Stephen's talking about EMS. This is like the Rolls Royce.
I know. I'm very lucky that I work with it as well. It's great.
So here, just break that down. EMS and the Cavitrons. What are you using that for?
Yeah. So Dental House, by the main practice I work at. So Christina is an EMS trainer, so an SDA trainer. So for those who don't know who Christina is, she was one of the first hygienists to open a hygienist direct only access practice. So about 16 years ago. So she was one of the hygienists that kind of petitioned to get direct access. So she opened it solely as a hygiene practice with dental practice that she kind of knew where patients could see a dentist, she could refer them there. And then I think it was only about a year and a half or 2 years in, she brought in dentists. So now it runs like a normal practice. We've got dentists there full time, a couple of dentists in the day. So she's very obviously hygiene led. So she always likes to be with the top of the equipment, essentially. So we're fortunate. So she got the latest EMS Airflow, which is, like you said, it's like the Rolls Royce. So I'm very lucky I work with that because it is great. And patients love it.
Okay, just break that down a bit more. What are you doing with the EMS? What is it for?
So the EMS, so the P's-on. So you've got the Airflow and you've got the P's-on. So traditionally, Airflow, for you that don't know what an Airflow is, it uses powder, water, and a little bit of air, essentially, to get rid of stains, is what it was designed for. So I always say to patients, it's like a mini jet wash for the teeth. So the powder's quite gritty, the classic powder, the original. And it's just designed for stain removal on the enamel, essentially. So you can't use it on the gums. But now EMS has developed a new powder called erythritol, which you can use on the soft tissues. So it's much smaller size grains, essentially, and it's a lot more gentle. So what it actually does is it doesn't just remove the stains, it gets rid of all the plaque biofilm, all the bacteria, and polishes the teeth as well. So it gets rid of the stains. So it means you can use it along the gum line. So around like implants, crown, you can pretty much within reason use it on any surface. You've got to be careful in certain areas of the mouth, of course, but like any airflow. But what we do now is we do something called GBT, which is guided biofilm therapy. So we put disclosing dye on the patient's teeth. And then that highlights to us as clinicians. Obviously, we can use that as a motivational tool, so we can show patients where they're missing. So that's another thing it's good for. But it shows us as clinicians where all the biofilm is. And then we go around with the airflow and we get rid of all that disclosing. And then once it's gone, we know we've got rid of the biofilm. So then we do that first. So traditionally, you would kind of do the airflow. A lot of people do it at the end like a polish, but we do that first. So then because you've got rid of that biofilm, you go around with the P's-on, so the ultrasonic, and you just get off the calculus. So if you've got a maintenance patient, for example, and they haven't got much calculus, they've got really good oral hygiene, it's perfect because you can go around. I still personally walk around. I go around every tooth with the P's-on, but I don't have to spend as long trying to get the calculus off. Or because traditionally, if you don't have the airflow, you would use the P's-on to get rid of the biofilm. So polishing doesn't get rid of all the biofilm, so you'd have to use the P's-on. So it means you'd have to use it more. But using the erythritol powder, it's really fine. It also heats the water. I don't know how it does it, but it heats it as it leaves. So it doesn't store it warm. It heats it as it leaves the handpiece, which is crazy. So it's like 40 degrees or something. So it reduces sensitivity. Patients love it. It's great as a clinician to use because if I've got veneers or crowns, I know I'm not going to scratch them. And I know I'm going to get all the biofilm off. So for me, it's given me so much more confidence in that sense that I know that I can really get in there and get that biofilm off safely. So, we tell.
I experienced it for the first time, funnily enough, at a practice that was started by a hygienist.
Oh wow! All right, nice.
So for my regular dental scale and polishes, I will go to that clinic just to experience that, and because I know that's what she loves and enjoys doing. I every 6 months I'm just taking myself there and just enjoying the experience with the AMS. So I totally agree with everything you're saying there. I've experienced it.
Yeah, it really has changed hygiene visits. So a lot of, like you said, a lot of patients will come back for it. Yeah. So which is great, but it is expensive equipment. So not everyone's as fortunate as I am to use it. So I'm very lucky in that sense that my boss is very on board with it, and that's what I was hoping to try and get into is some EMS training. So that's why I initially dropped my Fridays. So I've done a little bit with EMS and just trying to build that a bit more. And I do stuff with Philips on a Friday as well. So that's kind of where I'm going with it, is to try and build a bit more on that, because there's, two things I'm passionate about. So I like to talk about it.
You've started working as a hygienist. You're really getting experience. You're now getting trained to use the EMS machine. Tell us about how your career is developing in now starting to do other things outside of clinical work. How is your career developing?
Yeah, so when I sort of first started off, I did what everyone tells you not to do, and I went out and worked 6 days a week. And then I was just starting to burn myself out, but we were saving to try and buy a house and stuff like that. So when we kind of reached that point, I was like, okay, I need to kind of slow it down a bit. I always said to myself, if I get to the point where I feel like I don't feel like I'm giving my all, or I haven't got my 100% energy to do it, then I'm going to kind of change things. So I dropped this. I still do Saturdays, not as much now. It's like one every 6 weeks, but I was doing every Saturday. So dropped that practice where I was doing the Saturdays. Fridays, I dropped to become an EMS trainer. And then things changed with EMS a little bit. So like I said, so I started off doing a little bit of training and kind of building on that, but things have changed. It's kind of on the background a little bit, but I am also a brand ambassador for Philips. So I do a lot of stuff for Philips on Fridays as well. So I kind of always said ultimately, I'd like to do 3 days in surgery and then 2 days doing something else within dentistry, like EMS or Philips or something like that. There's just something a little bit different to kind of mix the week up. So, but dropping to 4 days I feel like I'm giving the best I can give, if that makes sense. So it made, for me, like mentally, it was so much better. I was, not that I wasn't enjoying work, but I was getting to that point where I felt like I was sort of burning out a little bit. And now I feel like it's right, it's perfect. So it works really well. So yeah, hoping to kind of develop that a little bit more my days off. So for Philips as a brand ambassador, I do, like you say, on Instagram. I do a lot of Instagram posts for them. I'm hosting my first webinar for them, which is cool, next week. So yeah, talking a bit about whitening and my experience with whitening. So things like that.
How did that develop, brand partnerships? Is that something that in the back of your mind you positioned yourself for? How did that even happen?
Yeah, so when I was nursing, a friend, again through my stepmom, but a friend of a stepmom was a hygienist. She used to be very high up in Philips. She used to run that dental side of Philips, essentially. So they used to have the brushing booths at the dental showcases. So she asked, did I want to do one of them? And I was like, yeah, okay, it's a bit different. So I was at the dental showcases. We were demonstrating the brushes to all the visitors. I really enjoyed that side of it. So I was always like, I quite like this little bit corporate side, that sort of, that side of sort of dentistry. And then I personally prefer Philips toothbrushes, and I love Philips toothbrushes. I like Philips whitening as well. So for me, I recommend Philips. I recommend Oral-B as well, but I always recommended Philips really from personal preference. So when I was at university, I remember a lot of people were pro Oral-B. And I remember Melanie, one of the hygienists, and I think she was, I can't remember what her exact role was, key opinion leader at the time, maybe for Philips, came in to do a talk about Philips. And then I was kind of her ally because I was like, I love Philips. And then just from there, we just stayed in contact and she was really supportive. And then I would just do a lot of posts on Zoom whitening because I was doing a lot of Zoom whitening at the time. And then she said, we're looking for a brand ambassador. I know that you are passionate about Philips. It's not something that's been forced on me. It's something the products I like. Would you be interested? And that was kind of how it came. So yeah, it was kind of from that day at university, essentially, speaking to Melanie about me being a bit of a Philips nerd, and that was it.
Yeah. And who makes an Instagram page about dentistry? What possessed you to start a page showcasing what you do? Just tell us about the thought process there.
So that I actually did not want to do an Instagram page. So like I was kind of saying earlier, when I was at uni, there was a lot of like student hygiene pages, and I used to get a bit frustrated with them because, like I was saying earlier, they wouldn't be putting the struggles you go through at university. They were putting, it's amazing. And then there was a few people that we'd met like in the year below or like that were on other courses, and they were like, I didn't realize it was going to be this hard. And I used to get a bit annoyed. I'd be like, come on, people, just show the real side of it a little bit as well. You know, people need to know it's hard work. It's very rewarding, but it's hard work. So I was like, no, not interested in Instagram. And then I started working at Dental Health Spa, and it's quite a cool practice. It's got a buzz about it. It's different to sort of like a regular practice. My boss was like, you need to get an Instagram account. I was like, no. And the practice wasn't really, they were on Instagram, but they weren't really doing a lot. She's like, come on, you need to do Instagram. And I was like, I'm not interested. No, she went, come on, make an Instagram account. So I did. And then just as I was kind of like building my books a bit more there, I would just start doing before and after photos and just posting stuff on there really, and just kind of building it from there. It does take a lot of time, and to begin with, it was, you know, if I did like a talking video, I just felt so awkward, and I was like, why am I doing this? This is so cringy. Like, what are my friends going to think of me? And then I got to the point where I was like, actually, this is the dental page. It's you know, it's just, you know, giving advice is what I do every day. So, and then when Victoria, our manager, came on at Dental Health Spa, she was really like, right, we want to build the Instagram. And she really, really helped me build it. And I think from then it kind of built, and that's kind of when like Philips contacted me and stuff like that. So, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm the best on it. I could definitely spend more time on it. I kind of go in waves where I like put loads of energy in it. And then I kind of, it's hard, like day to day, getting the content's really hard. But Victoria is really good, my manager, and Christina is very good at, you know, I've had a few influencers in, local influencers, and she's really good with, you know, letting me kind of be flexible with my book, and, you know, we're doing collaborations with them to kind of it builds Dental Health Spas Instagram, but mine as well. So she's, from that sense, I've got a lot of freedom there, which is what helps. So
how was that in terms of working with influencers and treating influencers? Did you get really nervous, or is this a normal?
The first time I did it was local influencer, but she'd been on like quite a few reality TV programs, and her partner's a footballer, and I was a bit like, I was a little bit awkward to begin with. I was like, but she just came in, and they just do it for a living, and they're just like, they know exactly what to say, what to do, and I was like, this is a completely different world. This is. But now as it goes on, like I've got more confident with it, but also I've kind of worry less, actually, because I used to think what people are going to think, or what they're going to think, but actually they're just normal people. And like I said, thankfully I've got my manager, so a lot of the times now if we have like an influencer in, then she'll come in and film it, so, and then she'll create the reel, so it makes it easier. I can just kind of focus on doing what I'm doing, and then she just kind of is in the background filming it. So again, not always possible, but fortunate that I have those opportunities there. So,
and I want to talk a little bit more practical about the realities of now starting work, being self-employed or employed, negotiating contracts. I guess the things that applicants or students wouldn't really be too aware of. What's been your experience of negotiating contracts? I mean, you started to talk about, for you, having no nurse was a no-go, was a deal breaker. What sort of things do you negotiate in contracts? And, you know, are you self-employed? Are you employed? Is there an option? Just tell us about that.
So majority is, I think things are changing again more recently, but majority of hygienists that I knew of, essentially, they all work self-employed, and they worked a mix of an hourly rate or on a percentage, essentially. So again, things are kind of changing a little bit in terms of the laws side of things, but essentially, if you're on a percent, you get paid your agreed percent of what you earn, basically. So if you see a patient, you get a percent of what you charge the patient. If you don't see a patient, you don't get anything. So if you've got gaps in your book, you don't get paid. If you're on hourly rate, then you get paid per hour. So if you have a gap in the middle of your day, for example, normally it's different agreements between practices, but normally you'll still get paid your hourly rate. So in terms of an hourly rate, you kind of know what you're potentially going to earn. If you normally, generally, from my experience, because I've been on both percentage and hourly rate, as self-employed, this is, then if my last patient cancelled and I went home early, then I would get paid up until that point. But if it's in the middle of your day, you can't go home, essentially, then you'll sort of get paid. Then you've got employed. I've never been employed, always worked sort of self-employed. There are hygienists that do get employed. I find a lot of the more sort of the corporate companies tend to employ their hygienists, not always the case. So yeah, but now I'm just on percentage, so I'm not on hourly rate. And they are kind of looking into sort of HMRC were kind of arguing if you're on hourly rate, if you're paying someone set amount of hours a week, essentially, then really that person should be employed. So they kind of look at it saying, well, you've kind of got the benefits of them being employed without paying them holiday and sick pay, essentially. So whereas if you're on a percent, then you're kind of earning what you're almost like renting the chair from them in a way, I guess. So, and for me personally, I actually prefer being on a percent, because if I've got a gap in my diary, yes, it's frustrating because I'm not earning money, but actually I can sit there, I can go and have a drink, I can do stuff on Instagram guilt-free because I'm not getting paid for not doing something. For me, I don't like to, which sounds really silly, but I didn't like it if I was sitting around doing nothing and someone's paying me. Do you know what I mean? I want to earn my wages. So for me, I like percent because I can just do my job. I know I'm going to get paid for what I do, basically.
Yeah.
So
makes sense. Makes absolute sense.
So, and I would say in sort of like you said, negotiating it, have a chat with, like, because different areas in the UK, there's sort of a different sort of base rate as such of pay. So I would say have a chat with local hygienists if they can kind of advise you what, you know, the average, obviously based on experience, but percent or hourly rate is. And I would also say as well, be confident with that, because coming out of university, I was quite lucky that my boss said, I'm going to pay you the same as I pay my other hygienists. You're doing the same job, just because they've got more experience of you. You're qualified, you know what you're doing. You've got, you know, I'm going to pay you the same. Whereas some people, you know, not that I've experienced personally, but some practices will think, oh, you're newly qualified, we can pay them less. But what I would say is you are doing the same job. Yes, you're less experienced, but you quickly pick up that experience as you go along. So I would just say be confident in knowing your worth. You know, you've worked hard to get to where you are. You know, you know what you're doing. So be confident in knowing your worth, essentially. You know, and be afraid of showing that, essentially.
I want to just unpick, because you said that you can choose to negotiate a percentage. Now, this is a bit hard to nail down because, you know, you can have a low percentage, but if the practice has a higher charge for the same treatment, you can okay, so I'm going to ask you almost an impossible question. What's the range of percentages from talking to your colleagues that sort of are banded about from low to high? What sort of percentages?
It can vary from between sort of like 10. I won't go into the specific numbers, but it could vary from like 10 to 15% from practices to practice. But like you say, you could have a practice where their fees are more. So they might charge, I don't know, £60 for a hygiene visit. The other practice might charge £40 for a hygiene visit, or, you know, so the practice where you're getting paid £60 for a hygiene visit, you might be in a lower percent, but you're actually going to earn more than the other practice. So yeah, it's different sort of areas have their kind of, you know, having a look on like Indeed as well, because quite a lot of practices will put on there the hourly rate, they'll put on there the percentage. A lot of it again is variable, and it's, you know, you can't go in there and say I want this percent, but, you know, having, you know, a chat with people, experienced hygienists that you may know, that are happy to kind of disclose that, they could give you, or they could give you a ballpark idea of that area, because, you know, London, you could have a higher percentage. Some places actually where there's less hygienists, they actually give you a higher percent. And some places like London maybe give you a lower percent, and actually it's supply and demand a little bit from them as well. So yeah, I would say have a chat with peers, or if you're at university, have a chat with the years above. So you'll get, you know, become good friends with the years above and the years below as well. So have a chat with them and their experiences, and and then just kind of find out, you know, what the going rate is for your area, and then just kind of know that in your mind and be confident, or be happy in knowing what you want to earn, essentially. So without being greedy, but, you know, if you want to earn a certain percent, then, and you think actually that's fair, then, you know, put that to them and see what they say.
Yeah.
So
So okay, I'm trying to picture. I've just come out of uni, qualified. I'm seeing all these jobs.
yeah.
I see a job in an area where I like, but I want to see if I can negotiate a better percentage. Do I apply for the job, go to the interview, and then negotiate? What's the practicalities of it?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say if you like the sound of the practice, have a look on their website, have a look at things like parking.
Mhm.
There are, how big is the practice, how many chairs there are, how, if it's an established practice and you think this looks like a really nice place to work. And if you've got a gut feeling, then I would say apply for it, go for an interview, and then just be honest in the interview and just say, actually, I really like the practice. I could
Yeah,
see myself working here, but I actually was hoping for a little bit higher percentage. Is there any room for negotiation on that? And then kind of go from there. It's not all about kind of what you earn. So
yeah,
I my percent varies between my two practices.
mhm,
So one pays less than the other, but I'm happy if that makes sense. So there's certain things that yes, I could leave and potentially earn a higher percent at another practice, but there's so many other benefits that are worth that extra percent to me
yeah,
working there. Do you know what I mean? It's not all about just trying to chase the money and just trying to earn more money, because you've
yeah,
got to be happy in what you do, and
yeah.
practice is important where you work. So
So earlier on, you're talking about you were saving for a house,
yeah,
um, and being self-employed, things work a little bit different. You don't work, you don't earn, maybe even getting a mortgage, it's a bit different. So just tell us about what you've had to learn in working as a self-employed individual and how that sort of dictated how you live life.
yeah. So first thing I would say is definitely get a good accountant, because it's so confusing.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, I mean, they didn't really, I think we were supposed to have one lecture on it. An accountant was supposed to come into university, but he was unwell that day. So we all left university thinking, what the hell are we doing? But my brother's self-employed, not in dentistry, but he recommended me his accountant. And he said, just trust me, he knows what he's doing. He's very good, and he's just going to make life easier for you. So yeah, I would say if you get a good accountant that can just explain things for you. So,
Mhm.
there's certain things you can claim back as expenses, like uniforms and things like that, that they can help you, to put in place. And, when it
Yeah.
comes to calculating your tax bill and submitting it all, it's just they're worth their weight in gold. So get a good accountant. And then, yeah, when, it is more tricky getting a mortgage being self-employed, because depends on the lenders again. So again, sort of mortgage brokers are really good for this. It depends. A lot of them want 3 years books or 2 years books, and if you've got an accountant, it's just so much easier for you to get your accounts.
Yeah.
For me, my fiance, she's employed, so it made it a lot easier that we both weren't self-employed.
Yeah.
Um, I think as hygienists, because we kind of work at the same practices, so we kind of have a contract of employment. It's not like we're freelancing.
Mm.
I think they kind of take that into consideration, that there is a bit more stability, although we are self-employed. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely a bit more tricky, but it's definitely doable. So yeah, it just maybe takes that little bit longer.
Yeah. How much flexibility do you get in terms of determining, let's say, holidays, time away from work? What do you think about when you're thinking about holidays? What goes through your mind?
So first thing is, okay, I'm going to have a week off unpaid. So it's not just the cost of the holiday. Because my fiance's mum was like, you just need to take a week off like every 3 months and just relax. I was like, yeah, but I don't get paid for that. So I need to budget for it. So that is another factor. So
Yeah.
probably initially I took less holiday than when I was employed, because
Yeah.
obviously employed you get 4 weeks, sometimes more paid. So yeah, of course you're going to take that time off.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you just kind of budget it. I've got colleagues that will plan their holidays, so they'll go, if they go away for a week, they'll go a few days at the end of the month into the next month.
Hmm.
So then it's like over 2 pays, so it's not
Okay.
as noticeable. So
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of each practice kind of has their different policy in terms of taking time off, but
Mhm.
most of the time it's trying to stick to sort of your bank, obviously bank holidays. You tend to have like your 4 weeks off.
Yes.
So as long as again, if you've got a good rapport with your boss and you're like, do you know what, I need to take this extra week off, then it's okay. And as long as you give enough notice, then I've never had any issues with having time off. But I don't go too far. I'm not taking time off. I'll book next Tuesday off. Things like that. We'll try and plan as in advance as I can. So yeah, you could take more than your 4 weeks off. It depends on the practice, but yeah, you're not getting paid for it, so you probably
It's
won't.
not as easy to do a year away in Australia.
Yeah, no, not easy to do that. Probably couldn't do that.
And I mean, I just want to now just get a few gems from you, working for so many years.
Yeah.
When it comes to the clinical work you do, what would you say is making your life easier? What are you doing now that you probably weren't doing when you first started? So this is really speaking to the newly qualified hygienists
Yeah.
that are trying to get confident and trying to now get into a flow of
Yeah.
working independently.
So the best bit of advice I can give you is don't be so hard on yourself. So again, a lot of people had said this to me, don't be so hard on yourself. But we can't help it. We want to be perfectionists. And I remember a case for me that sticks to my mind all the time is I had a patient who came in who had never seen a hygienist before, hadn't seen a dentist in years, and just had sub-calculus come into direct access to me, just calculus everywhere, just absolutely everywhere. I was like, okay, I need to get you booked in. I'm going to book you in for 2 1-hour appointments. I'll do half mouth and we'll kind of go from there. And the patient was like, yeah, fine, on board. Booked this patient in, numbed him up. I did a quadrant. And I was like, it's just not budging. This calculus was like rock solid. And then did quadrants. So he had 4 appointments with me. He then came in and saw the dentist and then had some x-rays taken by the dentist. So I hadn't taken any x-rays at this point because I knew he was going to be coming in with the dentist anyway. So I thought I'll just focus on what I'm doing. He's going to be ongoing treatment. But at the time, I just kind of wanted to get in there and get it all off. And then my boss was speaking to me about the patient, just about something, I don't know, he'd said to the dentist or something. And then I saw the x-rays on the screen and I was shocked at how much subcalculus was left on the x-rays. And I was like, oh my God, there's so much subcalculus there. She was like, yeah, it's fine. Don't stress. And I was like, I can't believe it. And I was mortified that there was subcalculus left after I'd done quadrant appointments with this patient. Yeah. And I was so down about it. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm obviously rubbish. I thought I was doing a really good job. And then I just spoke to a dentist about it. No, therapist I used to work with. And I was like, I had this really difficult case. And he was like, stop. What you've done is going to help them. He said, they're better off now than whether you left calculus behind or not. They're better off now than where they were before. And also it's ongoing treatment. You can't just cure period. You can't just, do you know what I mean? You can't get it all off in one visit. And for me, that was a really big learning curve because I was like, well, I've done textbook. I've done, root surface debridement. All the subcalc should have been gone. And then I was like, it was like concrete. It wasn't budging. And I was like, it's probably never going to budge. It's probably going to be. So, and then I told myself that actually it's ongoing treatment. He's going to have another course of treatment. And we got that off eventually, but it's not textbook. And actually looking at his mouth compared to where he started, it was so much different. So, and like they said to me, whatever you've done your best and you've done your best to help that patient. Yes. So I would say, try not, it's hard, but try not to be too hard on yourself. And you can't, like the lecturers used to say, it's like, you're not a Superman. You can only do what you can do. But even with them saying that, you just beat yourself up. But for me, that was a real learning curve because I was like, actually, no, it is ongoing treatment and I've done my best. And there's probably 100 patients I've seen before that I've got all the subcalculus off and done an amazing job. But it's this one tricky case that the outcome would have been the same probably with anyone they saw. Yeah. That was stuck in my mind. So, try not to be so hard on yourself and just, appreciate yourself a little bit more, which is what I probably didn't do. So,
and in terms of just in closing, community-wise, because dentistry, it can be isolating if you stay within your surgery and don't do anything else. What would you advise in terms of building community, especially as a hygienist? What can you do to build those connections?
Yeah, so I mean, the dentistry shows, they're normally quite good. Dentistry is a small world, so if you've got uni friends, for example, then you can kind of meet up with those there. Kind of all gives you that little boost to kind of be remotivated again, like new products and stuff like that. And just being friendly. I'm lucky that both practices I work at is they're really good teams. I've got really good nurses, so we become really good friends. I'm actually having one of my practices round on Friday for sort of drinks in the garden, so which is nice. So yeah, just talking to colleagues with them all the time, so that your colleagues and your friends. So yeah, just building rapport with your colleagues, I guess. And you can join. There's dental therapy networks and hygiene networks. Lots of Facebook pages where you can message them for advice as well anonymously. So there's lots of ways of staying connected, and also just building bridges as well. So talk to people, talk to your reps, and because you get connections made from those. Like the lecturer that was at uni, Melanie, that was a really good connection. But it was we just clicked or whatever, and we both had interest in the same sort of thing. So yeah.
Perfect. If people want to get in touch with you, people want to ask you some more questions, you've answered a lot.
I waffled on a bit. Sorry.
But if people really want to get in touch and ask a bit more, where can they find you? What's the best way?
Yes, you can message me on Instagram. It's probably the best bet, which is Brighton Hygienist on Instagram. So yeah, you can drop me a message on there. I might be a little bit slow at replying, but I will get back to you. As you probably know, it took me a few days to get back to you. But drop me a message on there. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you're looking to get into hygiene, or you just qualified, or I'm happy to reply to your messages and give you some advice. Hopefully it helps. It might not, but there we go. We'll see.
Fantastic. No, I'm 100% sure it will help. It's been really enlightening for me just learning about the pathway for hygienists, and the amazing job that you guys do. So no, thank you for sharing, and thank you for taking your time to be with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on as well. Really enjoyed it.